Two men walk into the same room at the exact same time. Neither of them says a word. Neither of them tries to impress anyone. There is no introduction, no display of status, no attempt to dominate the space. And yet, within minutes, something begins to shift. People start paying attention to one of them. Not loudly, not obviously, but subtly. When he moves, others notice. When he speaks, conversations pause. The room doesn't ask him to prove anything. It simply responds. The other man, he might be just as intelligent, he might work harder, he might even try more, but the room does not react to him the same way. No one disrespects him directly, no one pushes him aside, but attention drifts away from him. And if you've ever experienced this, you know how invisible it feels. You say something and it doesn't land. You try to contribute and it gets overlooked. You try to show your value, and somehow the more you try, the less it works. Most men think the difference comes from obvious things: money, status, confidence, communication skills. But that's not what creates presence. That's not what makes people lean in. The truth is far more subtle and far more uncomfortable. People don't respond to what you say, they respond to what you signal. They read your behavior before you even open your mouth. They notice how you sit, how you react, how quickly you respond, how easily you adjust yourself to fit others. They notice whether you need approval or whether you move without it. And the moment people sense that you need to be liked, something shifts, not consciously, but psychologically. Your words lose weight, your presence loses tension, your value becomes negotiable. This is the part most men never understand. Respect is not given to the man who tries the hardest to earn it. It appears around the man who doesn't need to prove it, the man who is not rushing, not reacting, not adjusting himself every second to fit the room. There's a certain stillness in him, a certain control, and that control sends a signal the human brain understands instantly. This man is stable. This man is grounded. This man cannot be easily moved. And when people feel that, they adjust to him, not the other way around. That is what creates presence, not noise, not effort, not performance, but psychological stability. And once you see it, you can never unsee it, because you'll start noticing it everywhere, in meetings, in conversations, in relationships. The men who speak the least but are heard the most. The men who move slowly but control the pace of the room. The men who don't chase attention but somehow own it. And it leads to a question most men avoid asking themselves. Not, how do I impress people, but something far more dangerous. What signals am I sending without realizing it? Because until you understand that, you will keep doing more, trying harder, speaking louder, and wondering why nothing changes. Most men believe they are being judged by what they say, their words, their ideas, their knowledge. So they try to speak better, sound smarter, explain more, prove more. But that's not how people actually evaluate you. Long before you finish your sentence, the judgment is already made, because the human brain doesn't wait for logic. It reads signals instantly, silently, constantly. It reads how you react under pressure. It reads how quickly you respond when challenged. It reads whether you hold your ground or adjust yourself to keep the peace. And these signals matter more than anything you say. A man can speak perfectly and still feel ignored. Another can say very little and still control the room. Why? Because one is trying to convince, the other doesn't need to. And people feel that difference immediately. This is where most men get trapped. They believe value must be demonstrated, so they try harder. They talk more. They explain their decisions. They justify their actions. They try to show people who they are. But the harder they try, the more something starts to break, because effort, when driven by insecurity, sends the wrong signal. It doesn't say, I am valuable. It says, I need you to see my value. And that small difference changes everything. The moment you need validation, you lose authority. The moment you seek approval, you give away control, because now your behavior is no longer yours. It is shaped by the reaction you are trying to get. You adjust your tone, you soften your opinions, you hesitate before disagreeing, you say yes when you should say no, not because it's right, but because it's comfortable, and people feel it. Not consciously, but instinctively. They sense that your position is flexible, your boundaries are negotiable, your identity is not fully grounded. And once that signal appears, respect begins to weaken, slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. Meanwhile, there is another type of man. He doesn't rush to speak, he doesn't react immediately, he doesn't adjust himself to fit every situation, not because he is arrogant, but because he is stable. He is not trying to be accepted. He is not trying to avoid tension. He is simply standing in his own position. And that creates a completely different psychological effect. People don't feel the need to test him. They don't feel the need to question him, because his behavior already answers the question. He is not easily moved. This is the hidden game most men never see. Respect is not something you chase. It is something you stop losing, and you lose it every time you overreact, every time you overexplain, every time you seek approval in places where it was never needed. So the real shift is not about becoming more impressive, it is about becoming more stable, less reactive, less dependent, less eager to be validated, because the moment you stop trying to prove your value is the moment people start to feel it. There comes a point in a man's life where something shifts, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, almost unnoticed. It begins with a realization that most of his decisions were never truly his. They were shaped by something invisible, the need to be liked, the need to be accepted, the need to avoid rejection. And at first, it feels normal, human even. Of course you want people to like you. Of course you want to avoid conflict. So you agree, you adapt, you adjust. You say yes, even when something inside you says no. You stay silent, even when you disagree. You make yourself available, even when you are exhausted. And slowly, without realizing it, your life begins to revolve around one thing: keeping everyone else comfortable. But here is the part no one tells you. The more you organize your life around approval, the less people respect you. Not because they are cruel, not because they want to disrespect you, but because the human mind reads something deeper. When a man constantly adjusts himself to fit others, it sends a signal. This man is uncertain. This man does not stand on solid ground. And once that signal appears, the dynamic changes. Your words carry less weight. Your opinions feel optional. Your presence becomes easy to ignore. Think about it. You've seen this before in meetings, in conversations. One man speaks his mind clearly, calmly, without hesitation. He doesn't try to dominate. He doesn't raise his voice. He simply stands in his position. And people listen, not always because they agree, but because his stance feels real. Another man does the opposite. He softens everything. He agrees quickly. He avoids tension. He tries to keep everyone happy. And the result? He is liked, but he is not respected. And this is where most men get it wrong. They chase being liked, thinking it will lead to respect, but it rarely does. Because respect does not grow from comfort. It grows from certainty. Weak men trade their position for approval. Strong men risk approval to keep their position. And that difference changes everything. Because the moment you stop needing everyone to agree with you, you become harder to control. You stop explaining every decision. You stop justifying every boundary. You stop adjusting your behavior to match every room you enter. Not out of ego, but out of clarity. You know what you stand for, and you don't move unless there is a reason to. This is the turning point. The moment a man stops chasing approval and starts building self-respect. And self-respect sends a signal stronger than anything you can say. It tells the world, my decisions are not negotiable. My time is not freely available. My identity does not shift based on your reaction. And at first, this change will feel uncomfortable. People will notice. Some will push back. Some will question you. Because they were used to the version of you that always agreed, always adapted, always said yes. But over time, something else happens. The people who truly respect you begin to respect you even more. And the people who only valued your compliance begin to disappear. That is not a loss, that is clarity. Because the moment you stop chasing approval is the moment you finally see who was never respecting you to begin with. There is a single word that quietly defines the direction of a man's life, a small word, simple, easy to say, but for most men, almost impossible to use correctly. That word is no. At first, it doesn't seem powerful. It feels basic, almost insignificant. But psychologically, it changes everything. Because the way a man says no reveals how much he values himself. Most men don't struggle with ability. They struggle with boundaries. When someone asks for their time, they say yes. When someone needs help, they say yes. When someone expects something, they adjust and say yes, not because they want to, but because they don't want to disappoint. They don't want conflict. They don't want to be seen as difficult. So they soften their response. They hesitate. They overexplain. I would, but I'm busy. I wish I could, but maybe later. Things are just a bit complicated right now. And in that moment, something subtle happens. Their no loses strength because it sounds negotiable, it sounds uncertain, it sounds like a decision that might change if pressure is applied. And people feel that immediately, not consciously, but instinctively. They sense that your boundaries are flexible, that your time can be adjusted, that your priorities can be moved, and once that signal appears, they start treating your time like it has no structure, no weight, no consequence. This is why many men feel overwhelmed, not because they have too much to do, but because they never learned how to say no with clarity. A weak man says no and then explains himself. A strong man says no and stops talking, not aggressively, not emotionally, just clearly. That doesn't work for me. I won't be able to do that. No apology, no justification, no performance, just a decision. And that kind of clarity creates a powerful psychological effect because it signals certainty. It signals that your time is not open to negotiation. It signals that your priorities are already decided. And people respond to that. At first, they may be surprised, especially if they are used to a version of you that always agreed, always adjusted, always made space. They might push back, they might question you, they might test your limits, but that phase is temporary because over time, something changes. The people who truly respect you begin to respect you even more. And the people who only valued your availability begin to disappear. And again, that is not a loss. That is a filter, because every time you say yes to something unnecessary, you are saying no to something important. Your time is limited, your energy is limited, your attention is limited, and the ability to say no protects all three. There is another layer to this that most men overlook. When you constantly explain your decisions, you subconsciously ask for permission. You turn your boundaries into something that needs to be justified, and that weakens your position before anyone even challenges it. But when you speak with clarity, without the need to explain, you communicate something different. You communicate that your decisions are already final, and that is where real respect begins. Not when people agree with you, but when they realize they cannot easily move you. There is a moment that reveals who a man really is. Not when things are easy, not when everything is going his way, but when something goes wrong, when pressure appears, when someone disagrees with him, when tension enters the room. In those moments, most men lose control without even realizing it. Their voice changes, their tone sharpens, their reactions become faster, defensive, emotional. They interrupt, they try to win, they try to prove their point. And in doing so, they give away something important: control. Because the moment your emotions react automatically, the situation is no longer under your control. It is controlling you. And people see that. Not consciously, but instinctively. They see how easy it is to move you, to trigger you, to influence your behavior. And once someone knows how to trigger you, they can control you. This is why calmness is one of the most dangerous traits a man can develop. Not passive calmness, not avoidance, but controlled calmness, the kind that appears when pressure rises and you still choose not to react. Because calmness sends a signal the human brain understands instantly. This man is not overwhelmed. This man is not reactive. This man is in control. And that signal changes the entire dynamic of the situation. Think about it. Two men are challenged in a conversation. One reacts immediately. He defends himself. He speaks faster. His energy rises. The other man pauses. He listens. He takes a breath. And then he responds slowly, clearly, without tension. Same situation. Completely different perception. The first man looks reactive. The second man looks powerful. And here's the part most people miss. It's not about what they said. It's about how they responded. Because emotional control is interpreted as strength, and emotional reaction is interpreted as weakness. Even if the words are the same, this is why the most respected men are rarely the loudest. They're not rushing to respond to everything. They're not trying to dominate every conversation. They're not reacting to every challenge. They choose when to speak. They choose how to respond. And sometimes they choose not to respond at all. And that choice creates power. Because when your reactions are not predictable, you become difficult to control. People cannot easily provoke you. They cannot easily manipulate you. They cannot easily pull you into emotional situations. And that creates distance, a space between what happens and how you respond. And inside that space is where control exists. Weak men react instantly. Strong men respond deliberately. Weak men are pulled by situations. Strong men choose their response to them. And this is where real authority begins. Not in what you say, but in what you refuse to react to. Because the less you are controlled by your emotions, the less you are controlled by the world. And when people realize they cannot easily move you, they stop trying. There is a space most men never notice, a small gap, invisible, almost instant. It exists between what happens and how you respond. And inside that gap, your entire life is decided. Someone disrespects you, someone challenges you, something doesn't go your way, and immediately your body wants to react. Your emotions rise, your thoughts speed up, your instinct tells you to respond now, defend, explain, attack, just do something. And this is where most men lose control. Not because they are weak, but because they are automatic. They don't choose their response. They release it instantly, without awareness, without control. And once that happens, the situation owns them. But a disciplined man does something different. He pauses, not for long, not dramatically, just enough to create separation, enough to stop the automatic reaction, enough to choose instead of react. And that pause changes everything. Because when you pause, you take back control. You stop the chain reaction, you stop emotions from deciding your behavior, you stop other people from controlling your state, and in that moment, you become dangerous in a different way. Not aggressive, not loud, but unpredictable. Because people can no longer read your reactions instantly. They can no longer trigger you easily. They can no longer manipulate your behavior through pressure. And this creates a powerful psychological shift. When someone expects you to react and you don't, they lose control of the interaction. They become uncertain. They start adjusting themselves to you. This is the hidden power of the pause. It removes urgency from your behavior. And urgency is often where weakness hides. Weak men feel the need to respond immediately, to defend themselves instantly, to fill silence quickly, because silence feels uncomfortable. But strong men understand something deeper. Silence is not weakness. It is control. The man who can sit in silence without reacting is the man who decides what happens next. And that decision carries weight. Think about it. In any conversation, the one who controls the pace controls the interaction. The one who is not rushing forces others to slow down. The one who is not reacting forces others to question themselves. And all of that begins with a simple skill, the ability to pause, to wait, to observe before responding. It sounds small, but it is one of the most difficult disciplines to master because it goes against instinct. It goes against emotion. It goes against the need to protect your ego immediately. But once you develop it, everything changes. Your words become more precise. Your reactions become intentional. Your presence becomes heavier because people start to feel something different around you. They feel that you are not easy to move, not easy to provoke, not easy to control. And that creates respect without effort. Because control is not about forcing outcomes. It is about controlling yourself first. And that control begins in the space most people ignore. The space between stimulus and response. There is a silent mistake that slowly destroys a man's value. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't feel dangerous at first. In fact, it often feels like the right thing to do. Being available, being helpful, being easy to reach, easy to talk to, easy to rely on. At first glance, these look like positive traits: responsible, supportive, dependable, and in the right context, they are. But when these traits are not controlled, they turn into something else, something invisible, something costly, because the more available you become, the less valuable you appear. Not because people don't appreciate you, but because the human mind associates scarcity with value. What is always there is rarely respected. What is always accessible is rarely protected. And most men never see this happening. They answer every message immediately. They say yes to every request. They make time for everyone except themselves. They believe they are building connections. But in reality, they are lowering their perceived value. Because when your time is always open, it feels like it has no structure, no priority, no cost. And people begin to treat it that way. They cancel on you easily. They interrupt you without hesitation. They expect you to adjust because you always have. This is not disrespect in the traditional sense. It is something more subtle. It is the absence of perceived value. And that absence is created by overavailability. Now, compare that to a different kind of man. He is not distant, he is not cold, but he is selective. His time is not freely given, his attention is not easily accessed. When he commits, he shows up fully, but he does not spread himself across everything. And because of that, his presence carries weight. When he speaks, people listen. When he makes time, it matters. Because it is not common, it is chosen. And that choice creates value. This is the principle most men avoid. Not because it is complicated, but because it requires discipline. It requires saying no. It requires disappointing people sometimes. It requires prioritizing your own direction over other people's expectations. And that is uncomfortable, especially if you are used to being the one who is always there, always reliable, always available. But there is a difference between being dependable and being accessible without limits. One builds respect. The other destroys it, because respect is not built on how much you give. It is built on how well you protect what you have. Your time, your energy, your attention. These are your most valuable resources. And if you treat them like they are unlimited, others will too. Weak men try to be everywhere for everyone. Strong men choose carefully where they show up. Weak men respond immediately. Strong men respond intentionally. Weak men make themselves constantly available. Strong men make their presence meaningful. And that shift changes everything, because the moment your time becomes selective, your presence becomes valuable, not because you are trying to create distance, but because you are finally creating structure. And structure is what gives your life weight. There is a type of confidence most men misunderstand. They think confidence is loud, visible, expressed through words, energy, dominance. They think it's about speaking more, showing more, proving more, and so they try to project it. They talk with intensity. They fill every silence. They make sure they are seen, heard, acknowledged. But real confidence doesn't work like that. Real confidence is quiet, not because it has nothing to say, but because it doesn't need to say everything. It is not built on reaction. It is not built on validation. It is built on certainty. And certainty doesn't rush. It doesn't perform. It doesn't try to convince anyone. It simply exists. This is why the most confident men in any room are rarely the loudest. They don't interrupt. They don't compete for attention. They don't need to prove they belong, because they already know they do. And that internal knowing changes everything. It changes how they speak, how they move, how they respond to others. They don't overexplain their thoughts. They don't defend every opinion. They don't feel the need to be right in every conversation, because their identity is not dependent on external agreement. And that is where true power begins. Most men speak to be validated. They say things hoping for approval, for agreement, for recognition. And when they don't get it, their energy shifts. They adjust. They try again. They push harder, but a man with quiet confidence doesn't do that. He speaks when he has something to say, and when he finishes, he is done. He doesn't chase reactions. He doesn't look for approval. He doesn't need confirmation because his words are not a request. They are a statement, and that difference is felt immediately. People may not always agree with him, but they feel his presence. They feel his certainty. They feel that he is not easily influenced. And that creates respect without effort. There is another layer to this that most men overlook. The less you need validation, the more your presence grows, because you are no longer adjusting your behavior based on how people respond. You are no longer shaping yourself to fit the room. You are simply being consistent, grounded, unmoved, and consistency builds trust. Not loudness, not performance, not intensity, just quiet, stable presence. Weak men try to be noticed. Strong men are noticed without trying. Weak men speak to fill silence. Strong men let silence do the work. Weak men need recognition to feel confident. Strong men remain confident even when no one is watching. And that is what makes quiet confidence so powerful. It does not depend on the environment. It does not rise or fall based on attention. It remains the same. And that stability creates something rare, something most people are not used to encountering. A man who does not need anything from them. Not approval, not validation, not recognition. And when people feel that, they respond differently, because they are no longer dealing with someone who is trying to gain something, they are dealing with someone who already has it. And that changes the entire dynamic. There is something people can feel even when you don't say a word. It's not confidence, it's not status, it's something deeper. Direction. A man with direction moves differently. He doesn't drift through conversations. He doesn't react to every distraction. He doesn't adjust himself based on what is happening around him, because his focus is not outside. It is fixed on something internal, something he is building, something he is moving toward. And that creates a presence you cannot fake. Most men don't lack ability. They lack direction. They wake up and react. They respond to messages. They follow conversations. They adjust to opportunities, but they are not moving toward anything specific. They are just moving. And that creates a certain energy, scattered, unfocused, easy to pull in different directions, easy to influence, easy to control. Because when a man has no clear direction, the world decides for him. Other people's priorities become his priorities. Other people's expectations become his decisions. And slowly, he loses control of his own path. But a man with direction is different. His time is structured. His attention is focused. His energy is intentional. He doesn't need to say it out loud. People feel it. They feel that he is not available for everything. They feel that his time is already committed. They feel that his life is moving somewhere with or without them. And that creates something powerful. Attraction. Not the loud, attention-seeking kind, but the quiet, magnetic kind. Because people are naturally drawn to clarity. They are drawn to those who know where they are going, even if they don't fully understand it, even if they don't agree with it. Because certainty is rare, and rare things attract attention. Think about it. In any group, the man who knows what he is doing stands out immediately, not because he is trying to, but because his behavior is aligned, his actions match his direction. His decisions are consistent, and consistency builds trust. Weak men are easily distracted. Strong men are difficult to interrupt. Weak men follow what is urgent. Strong men follow what is important. Weak men react to the moment. Strong men move toward a vision, and that vision becomes the foundation of their presence. Because when a man knows where he is going, he doesn't need to chase attention. He doesn't need to impress anyone. He doesn't need to prove himself constantly. His actions speak for him. His discipline defines him. His direction stabilizes him. And that stability is what people respect, not because it is loud, but because it is rare. Most people are lost, confused, reactive. So when they encounter someone who is clear, focused, and consistent, they notice, they pay attention, they adjust, not because he asked them to, but because direction creates gravity. It pulls people in, and the more aligned a man becomes with his own path, the less he is influenced by everything else. Because he is no longer searching for where to go, he is already moving. At the end of it all, nothing you've heard is complicated. There is no secret technique, no hidden strategy, no performance you need to master. It all comes down to something far simpler and far harder. Stability, the kind of stability most men avoid building. Because it requires discipline, it requires awareness, it requires letting go of habits that feel comfortable but slowly destroy your presence. The need for approval, the need to react instantly, the need to explain yourself, the need to be available to everyone, the need to be validated. These are not strengths, they are dependencies. And every dependency gives something away: control, respect, authority, piece by piece, without you noticing, until one day you realize people don't take you seriously. Not because you lack ability, but because your behavior never showed stability. And this is where everything changes. Not when you try harder, but when you remove what weakens you. You stop chasing approval, you stop reacting to everything, you stop explaining your boundaries, you stop making your time freely available, you stop seeking validation in every interaction. And as you remove these behaviors, something else begins to appear: space, silence, control. You speak less, but your words carry more weight. You move less, but your presence becomes stronger. You react less, but your decisions become clearer. And people feel it. They may not understand it, they may not be able to explain it, but they respond to it. Because human psychology has always worked this way. Stability attracts, control commands respect, certainty creates influence, and none of these require noise. None of these require effort to be seen. They exist beneath the surface, in how you behave when no one is watching, in how you respond when pressure appears, in how you carry yourself when there is nothing to prove. This is what it means to become unshakable. Not perfect, not emotionless, but grounded. A man who cannot be easily moved by opinions. A man who does not adjust his identity based on reactions. A man who does not need constant validation to feel secure. And that kind of man does not chase respect. He doesn't demand it, he doesn't ask for it, because he understands something most people never realize. Respect is not something you gain, it is something you stop losing. And the moment you stop losing it, everything changes.